Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lunch Bites webinar series. We're going to get started in just a moment after everyone has a chance for their computers to load the presentation today. So I'm Chelsea Simpson with the National Farm to School Network, and I want to welcome everyone to a special presentation of our Lunch Bites webinar series, which is usually held at noon Central Time on the second Tuesday of every month. However, today's presentation was timed to coincide with the launch of an exciting new resource that we're sharing with you today. Our presentation will be followed by a Q&A session, so feel free to ask any questions as you think of them during today's presentation by typing them into the question window on your webinar control panel. For more webinar listings, visit our website, farmtoschool.org, which is where you will also find additional resources related to Farm to School, including links to Farm to School contacts in all 50 states. Next slide. If you're new to Farm to School or have questions about food safety issues, local policy, or other general questions, please contact your state lead after today's webinar. You can see a map of our 50 states and our regions here on the screen right now. This is a screenshot from our website, and this is the page where you will find contact information to all those local experts. While you're on our website, you can also join our network and sign up for our email newsletters, which will let you know about future webinars and other events and resources. We're excited that you're all with us today, and we're going to start out with a quick poll just to find out how many new folks we have joining us on the webinar and how many of you have participated with us at some point in the past. So thanks for taking a moment to give us a little bit of feedback and let us know a little bit more about who we have with us today. That's great. So we've got a lot of new folks on the line with us today. We'll go ahead and get back to our presentation then and get started with today's webinar, which is Evaluation for Transformation, a Cross-Sectoral Evaluation Framework for Farm to School. And as I said, we're launching this resource today. We're going to tell you where to find it on our website and a little bit more about it during the course of the webinar. I want to introduce you next to our panelists. We have one panelist who wasn't able to join us today, Jillian Barclay. She's replaced on the webinar today by Ernisha Pinder from the Aetna Foundation. We also have with us today Anupama Joshi, who is the Executive Director and co-founder of the National Farm to School Network. And we have Gail Feenstra, who is the Deputy Director of SAREP, that's the Sustainable Ag Research and Education Program at UC Davis. And we have Tia Henderson, who is the Research Manager at Upstream Public Health, which is a public health policy organization. Ernisha Pinder is going to get us started today with a quick introduction and some information about our resource.
Thank you, Chelsea, and good afternoon, everyone. Mark Bertolini, who is chairman of the Aetna Foundation, is a native Detroiter and is committed to strengthening local food systems and farms at the community level. Ensuring that children, their families, and communities have access to fresh, locally grown food has been a priority for him as part of the Aetna Foundation investments. Now, we know in health and healthcare, the viable local food systems that provide access to affordable, healthy, fresh foods are critical for community health and wellness. We also know that Farm to School has multiple benefits at the local level: economic, health, education, as well as overall benefits to improving community wellness. However, we need to understand what can sustain Farm to School programs, what can allow them to function at the highest level to benefit students, parents, the school community, farmers, and other stakeholders, as well as the local economy. Plus, we need to understand how supportive policies and the strong evidence about the viability of Farm to School across different sectors can support Farm to School programs. The Farm to School Evaluation Framework provides a start for this, and the Aetna Foundation is pleased to support this work. On behalf of the Foundation, I would like to thank Anu, Tia, and members of the Advisory Committee and other stakeholders who worked hard to put this document together. We can be assured that this document will be a major contribution to the field across multiple sectors that are concerned about the health and welfare of children, their families, and their communities. Congratulations on a job well done.
Thank you, Anisha. This is Anupama Joshi speaking, and we are really thankful to the Aetna Foundation for supporting this project in part and for their engagement. I'd like to get us started by outlining our plan for today's webinar. And in short, this is the official launch webinar for this much anticipated resource. On today's session, we're going to provide some context for why this is such an important milestone for the farm to school and farm to preschool movement. Next, we'll dive into the contents, the core of the session, to introduce you to the content so that you can find what you need on the document easily. And on your chat function window, Chelsea Simpson has just sent you a web link to the resource as well, so it's live and you can download it as we go through the contents, which will be helpful. And lastly, we want to give you some ideas on how you can use this resource. So that's how we will be structuring the session today. So to start off with, why do we need an evaluation framework? As you may know, farm to school in the K-12 settings, and more recently, farm to preschool in the early care settings, has seen tremendous growth in the last decade. Just looking at the sheer numbers, in the late 90s, there were only a handful of farm to school sites across the country, and we have more than 40,000 schools in the country reporting farm to school programs. This is data from the first ever farm to school census conducted by the USDA, which in itself is an important milestone we should be proud of. The first ever survey of farm to preschool was also conducted in 2012, reporting more than 500 plus sites across the country. So only in the last decade, we've also seen farm to school and farm to preschool being recognized as a potential strategy to significantly improve or enhance public health and economic development outcomes. And researchers increasingly have also been looking at documenting associations with education and environmental quality sectors. We've also seen over the last decade and a half or so that funders are showing interest in this model, and efforts are being supported by existing community resources. We also now have a better understanding of how farm to school is adapted across the country in different community conditions and in different agricultural growing regions. So as the field has grown over the last decade, we've been consistently hearing from people involved in this work a need for guidance on how to consistently track and monitor program activities, along with how to monitor and take a look at local, state, and national policies that influence farm to school, and validated instruments to measure those outcomes or come up with some common outcomes that are worthy of consistent measurement. So we hope that this evaluation framework will start to meet some of the needs that have been articulated by the field. As you all know, farm to school looks quite different in different locations, and farm to school activities can differ and draw strength from each unique local context. So to fully realize the potential of the model, a cross-sectoral and broad collaborative approach to evaluation and research was felt necessary. That is what this evaluation framework is. So what is the evaluation framework? It is a framework, just to clarify, that it is a framework, not a toolkit or not a step-by-step guide for evaluation. It is a starting point, and it is not the be-all and end-all for the field. And in developing it, we realized that it will be always a work in progress, since this is a dynamic field and it's constantly changing. So what does it contain? As I mentioned, it meets specific gaps in the field that have been articulated with regards to common language, with regards to common outcomes, common metrics, and also highlighting cross-sectoral connections for the potential outcomes that farm to school has. There is something for everyone in this framework document, we hope, and we've designed it in that way, which is, I think, the most important piece, that you can open it up and find something that relates to you, be it at whatever level of farm to school or farm to preschool that you were working on. And There are also accompanying user guides and sector briefs and other materials that we are going to be providing to you, which are going to help you and which we hope you will use to promote the framework widely. So moving into just giving you a little bit more context about how the framework was developed. Just like Farm to School at the local level, where collaboration is absolutely critical, the framework development could not have been possible any other way. It was an intensely collaborative process that spanned several years. It involved a lot of people informally over years as people discussed this and deliberated it, the need for this evaluation framework, and more formally, since we started this process in September 2013, almost a year back. In sum total, more than 300 people have been involved as contributors to working groups, participants in discussions, reviewers, as well as have had some inputs in what the framework contains just by engaging with the network in short courses that have been held or other workshops and events that have been held regarding farm-to-school evaluation. So there are many people that are listening in today and outside of this webinar that have helped with developing this resource. And I want to take a minute to thank each and every one of you for your commitment to making this product as good as it is today. The development process was truly like piecing together a puzzle that made sense to everyone and that could be used by multiple users, whatever angle they were entering farm to school. Two things to note here. Early on in the process, we agreed that we wanted this resource to serve as a resource for both farm to school at the K-12 level and farm to preschool at the early care setting level. So that is the unique feature of this resource. And every time we say farm to school on today's webinar session or in the framework document, we mean both farm to school at the K-12 level and farm to preschool at the early care setting level. Next, I'm going to pass it on to Gail for delving into giving you a flavor of the content of the framework. Gail?
Thank you, and welcome everybody. As we began to gather and as we watched the movement grow, the farm to school movement grow, we began to see more and more we needed a common way to describe farm to school activities consistently, something that we could all agree on. So we had seen with over a decade of work on the ground, there were many, many different ways that farm to school could be described and many different kinds of entry points. So early on in the process of developing this evaluation framework, we decided together how we define farm to school. And in fact, the National Farm to School Network has adopted this already and is using the same language in all of their materials. But the core elements that we defined included these three things: procurement, which was about buying, serving, promoting local foods and food products in schools and early childhood centers. And by local, we were allowing each of the institutions to define local as they saw fit. Then the second component is school gardens, and that includes the planting, tending, harvesting, and eating of foods that takes place in outside spaces, but also inside spaces, like vertical gardening, and it includes and really emphasizes experiential learning with kids. And then the third component is education for children, for families, both inside the classroom and outside the classroom. And it can include a variety of things like classroom curriculum that's aligned to local, state, and national standards. It can include experiential learning, such as farm tours, farmers market trips, or visits to chefs. Or it can include skill development that's related to food production, food prep, nutrition, cooking, etc. So those are the core elements of farm to school. Next. We recognized, however, that for these programs to be sustainable, we need support systems that are behind these core elements. So these are the 6 seeds, so to speak, of making a program effective: the training and professional development, promotion and media, planning, coordination, and evaluation, outreach and community engagement, policy, and funding. Okay, and we wanted to define who is involved and where they are in the whole food system cycle. So farm to school activities can happen in very many different kinds of locations, or what we call touch points. Farms, community, home, and family. That's the outer rim of this circle. We also recognize that the people that are involved in farm to school are involved with these various touch points. These are the actors. And all of these things connect to our students, the school children that benefit from farm to school. They are touched by all of these different people and locations. As the movement has grown, we've also realized that farm to school is multidimensional, but in regard to this evaluation framework, the outcomes and indicators that we're talking about are multi-sectoral. So we realized that any kind of an evaluation framework needed to be structured around multiple sectors, and we agreed on these four that you see. First is public health, which has to do with providing healthy food options, nutrition, and food-based education to influence healthy eating behaviors and healthy lifestyles in children. There's education, which is farm to school supporting educational outcomes for students by increasing access to healthy food, by promoting educational activities that engage children and their families, and developing skills related to eating healthfully. There's economic development, which has to do with providing economic opportunities for producers, farmers, fisherfolk, ranchers, laborers, distributors, processors, food service staff, and others who support the local food system. And then finally, environmental outcomes. And this has to do with farm to school activities that support practices that build healthy soils, healthy water, clean air, and ecosystems in both urban and suburban and rural environments. So each of these sectors comes with a little icon, and as you go throughout the document, you can look for those icons to help you locate any particular indicators and outcomes that go with that particular sector. Okay, and then another thing we did, and we realized that in each of those sectors, there are basically three kinds of areas. That's programs that have to do with planning, reporting, and evaluation, research that builds on those programs, and policy. So each of those areas is included in each of our sectors. So when we go through the outcomes and indicators, there'll be program level outcomes, there'll be research level outcomes, and there'll be policy level outcomes. So there's something we hope for everybody. And then finally, food equity, food justice, we believe is an important part of farm to school. We know that it has the potential to impact all kids by bringing healthy access to local foods and schools, and all farmers and distributors. However, we realized that we needed to be intentional about making sure that all races, ethnic groups, classes, genders are included in each of our sectors and groups of actors. In particular, we wanted to be sure that we are inclusive when it comes to decision making about farm to school. So how did we go about including a social justice perspective in this evaluation framework? We sought out and we intentionally incorporated suggestions from experts in the field who have combed through this document and have suggested additional and more inclusive language in each sector and in the outcomes and in the measures. We acknowledge that this is probably not complete. It's only the start of the dialogue of how farm to school can continue to work towards a potential goal of food justice, but we are happy that we've made a start, and we believe this helps to provide some guidance through this evaluation framework resource, and we certainly invite any of you to help us grow in this area. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Tia, who's going to highlight more of the contents of the framework.
Thanks, Gail. This is Tia Henderson here from Upstream Public Health based in Portland, Oregon. And I just want to make sure, I don't know if everybody noticed in their chat window box that Chelsea placed a link there. So if you want to download the framework and kind of follow along or just flip through it while you're listening, you're welcome to do that. So the pictures on your screen right now are example tools, things that some of you may be familiar with, things like theory of change, logic models. There's also a little table in there to help folks think about the different activities that they're doing with different participants in a farm-to-school effort throughout the year. And these are examples that we've listed here because we realized, as we talked about some of the research and some of the different programs that we were aware of and know about over the lifespan of farm to school so far, is that a crucial element for any type of evaluation effort is really having folks write down, document, communicate the different types of activities that each program or initiative is taking on. This becomes really important because when we want to try to understand, well, what's possible through farm to school, we need to know what people are doing and then find out what activities lead to which types of outcomes. So for this reason, in the very beginning of in chapter 4, starting on page 28, I'm going to go ahead and give you some of those page numbers for those who did end up deciding to download it just now. We have a description of program articulation, communication tips, and then there's also a lot of different tools in the appendices related to the types of evaluation resources people might need beyond this framework, things like how-to guides and trainings and things like that. Because farm to school means so many different things to different people, and each initiative is going to describe its efforts differently, this framework's function is to help people establish a few key areas in those 4 sectors that Gail described in order to weave common threads across all different types of programs and across the country. So, for example, one program might focus on helping families learn about local foods, maybe even growing their own, while another might really want children to learn some of those skills about, growing food and cooking it in meals. However, both of these types of programs are likely conducting different types of activities that align with public health and education outcomes. So no matter what, no matter what the design or the overarching goal that's going to be different for each site, and we want that difference, right, is we want people to be able to say, hey, this is what we're doing and this is what we're tracking, in order for us as a field collectively to be able to talk to each other. Oh, did you try this activity? And what did you get from that? And here we tried this activity, and this is what we found. So describing or articulating your program consistently is really essential. Next slide. So I'm going to briefly go into wonk land for a minute. This is our theoretical perspective. When we were crafting this evaluation framework, we decided that it's really important to have some theoretical basis for any type of practice. And this is what we worked with. So this whirlwind-like image is what we're calling a hybrid social ecological model. And we used it to really ground the way that we were reading different types of research about what's possible in farm to school and what we're understanding when we look into the practice. Lots of people write evaluation reports about their specific type of program, and we needed some way to orient. So this social ecological models are used a lot in the field of public health, and they are derived from what's called system theory, which is used in lots of different fields. But the main principle for you to take home
is that this concept and this diagram is really a way for us to understand how the different types of environments, like where we live, where we work, where do we go to school, where do we play, who's in our social network, affect the different types of choices and behaviors that we have and what's available to us. So we looked at a lot of different models for different types of social change, and this is where we went with the framework, this hybrid model. And you'll notice here, as you look at it, there's these 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of smaller, minor cones within the larger one, and that's where the different sectors are. So we wanted to be able to show, as you can see in this model, that there's a lot of interaction that happens within farm to school across these sectors, within their sector, and then as you notice from the top layer down, farm to school can really benefit from different types of national, state, and local policies. Farm to school can also affect those policies. There are cultural and societal characteristics or different types of norms that farm to school may relate to. Physical environments such as like your country and your state and region and school and farms and your community, those are all affected by potentially and may affect farm to school efforts. And in that part close to the mid to the bottom, when you get into community and family and tribe and clan and individual, that's when you start getting into your social settings and all the different ways that talking and learning about food and growing food, etc., different types of efforts in farm to school can really affect the way we think, what we eat, etc., and then even just our own skills, like what we know and understand as individuals. We can go to the next one. So this is a, I know it's a very dry slide, I apologize for that, but this is just a really quick table of contents. The document's a bit long, so we didn't want to go, we won't have space to go really deep into each piece of it. This is the launch, just to give you sort of a feel and an overview. And I just wanted to let you know, chapters 1 through 3 is really sort of like the background and context of what farm to school is, kind of some of the process that Gail and Anupama already talked about a little bit. That's kind of the high level. Like if you want to know what kind of criteria was used to select different types of outcomes measures or indicators, or what other theories we looked at, or any of that kind of nuts and bolts stuff, you can go to chapters 1 through 3. Chapter 4 is where kind of the big heart of a lot of the framework is. You'll notice it's the largest part, and it has that section that I already brought up about program articulation beginning on page 28, and then it's the deep dive into each of the 4 sectors that Gail described. Chapter 5 really provides some kind of lesson learns and suggested next steps for different groups that are really invested in farm to school, like what they might do with this framework to take it to the next level. And then the appendices is, again, where a lot of the resources lots of folks may want are kind of resting and waiting. And I just want you to know that, at any time you create a document, like you can only get what's available right at that moment. And there's probably stuff coming out, and people are creating new tools all the time. And so on the National Farm to School Network's website, there's actually a place where you, if you have a new tool or resource to share, can post it. So they have part of the process of this framework is taking what we had found, putting it online so people can search for it, and then giving people a vehicle to add more to that. And we're hoping that will evolve even further over time. So there's lots of useful resources and tools, and we'll go a little bit further into an example of some of these different types of outcomes measures and indicators next. Anupama is going to tell you more about Chapter 4. Anu?
Thanks, Tia. So as Tia mentioned, Chapter 4 is really the core, the heart of the framework, and even within that, chapters 4.2 to 4.5 really dig into each of the sectors that we've identified we wanted to focus on: public health, community economic development, education, and environmental quality. And within each of those sectors, we've identified that we wanted to look at priority outcomes, indicators, and measures, and we wanted to do it at 3 different levels: at the program level, where site coordinators, practitioners, funders will find information on outcomes, indicators, measures that are relevant for program level people. There are outcomes, indicators, and measures at the research level, and we hope that researchers, evaluators, as well as funders will go towards looking at those when they're looking at research and evaluation. And then at the policy level, so for policymakers, so school boards, for funders interested in policy change, to really focus their effort on looking at the policy level indicators, outcomes, and measures. So for each of the sectors, we've broken down each sector into program level outcomes, research level outcomes, and policy level outcomes. And there was lots of discussion within the contributors to this framework about how we selected the ones that you see in the document. On page 22 of the document, you'll find criteria that we've used for selecting these priority outcomes, indicators, and measures. As you might know, there are lots of options here in terms of what we could have put in the framework, but we decided to put some as priority because of certain reasons, and those are listed on page 22 as criteria. For each of these levels, as you'll see, program, research, and policy, we've developed an icon, and these icons are followed right through the document as well. So, if you're interested in program level information, go towards this outcome, towards this icon, and you'll find the right user level for yourself. So let's go next into looking at some examples. Let's start with the public health sector, which is chapter 4.2 in the framework document. Again, notice the icon for public health. You'll find that for each of the sectors, there is an icon also associated with it, and you can access it easily. If you're interested in a particular sector, go to that icon and you'll find information about that. So related to public health outcomes, here's what we know. We know that children access healthy local foods through farm to school and farm to preschool activities, and on an average consume an additional 0.9 to 1.3 servings of fruits and vegetables every day, and consume less of the less healthy food products as a result of farm to school programs. So how then, the question arose, how then does a farm to school site begin to understand how children's access to and their families' access to healthy local foods is increasing? What are the measures that they can collect data for? What data is easily available and feasible for them to collect? This is the information that is available in the framework under public health and at the program level, since we are talking about a program site level work or activity. So an example of a program level outcome listed under public health is that students and their families access locally produced healthy food through schools. And the measures at the program level include simple things like meal participation of students eligible for free and reduced price meals. This is information that is available with the school district or the school. Or alternatively, increase the meal participation on days when farm to school is conducted. So just to give you a flavor of the kinds of things that are easily available and accessible at the program site level, the measures have been selected accordingly as well. So moving along to give you an example of a public health sector outcome at the research level, an example would be increased consumption of local healthy foods with recommended measures for researchers. So at the research level, we want families to access local healthy foods in the community. The measures that we came up with to look at whether this particular public health outcome was being met by farm to school or not would be measures such as self-reports of supplemental nutrition assistance program users who report using SNAP benefits for buying local healthy foods, whole foods, use them at farmers markets, food stands, and other access points. So this is information that is not so easily available for organizations that are working in the field or for school sites that are implementing farm to school programs. So this is listed as a research level measure just because this could be something that an external researcher or evaluator could find information on or could be collecting information on. So just to give you a flavor of the way these things are structured. So I'm going to pass it on to Gail now again To give you another example from the community economic development sector, Gail?
This is one of my favorite areas. I'm here. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So we know that regional producers are benefiting economically from schools that purchase local and regional food for school meals. But how much and where and how? So one of our prioritized outcomes was local and regional economic impact. And the indicator, one of the indicators at the program level is to increase market opportunities and income for local producers, processors, and distributors their sales to school districts and potentially to other institutions. Now, how do we get data and measure that? We've suggested a number of measures, one of them being total dollars of all local products purchased by school districts and or schools. Another way to characterize that might be the percentage of a total food budget that's spent on local foods. And if we really want to capture what's going on with some of our socially disadvantaged farmers, we can look at the percentage of sales to local socially disadvantaged producers or growers or ranchers. So these are all kinds of measures we can look at to get a handle on economic opportunities. Now that's at the program level. We also realize that there are policy level outcomes that support those institutional procurements at the program level. So, for example, one indicator we could use would be institutional procurement policies that support purchasing local and regional foods. And we could measure that a number of different ways. One way might be the number of institutional, like school or district procurement policies that support that kind of purchasing. Another might be the number of state or local procurement policies with that language. There are all kinds of measures which we've listed here, 1.1 through 1.6, that gives us some quantitative measure of the extent to which policies are supporting the kinds of activities we want to see in local programs. So let me turn it now over to Tia to talk a little bit about how all of these sectors and outcomes are actually related to each other.
Great, thanks, Gail. So when I was bringing up the social ecological, that people could sort of see, okay, there's this thing, there are lots of things going on in farm to school related to public health, and maybe we don't always think all the time about how those things might relate to things going on in education or environmental quality or community economic development. But as we were talking about farm to school and reading again over evaluation reports and reading through research literature on different aspects of farm to school efforts, we realized that there are actually a lot of things where if you pull on one thread, a bunch of other threads end up being tugged, right? So that's a simple way of saying, you know, I'm going to go ahead and walk through an example here where when one set of farm to school activities may be intending, you know, are designed and there's a goal to impact one specific outcome in one sector, there may be a parallel direct or indirect influence on other types of outcomes. And what we're hoping over time is that as programs continue to articulate what they're doing and we start seeing more and more of the different types of outcomes that people are tracking, we'll actually start to find some of those really easy synergies and you know, leverage on those, basically. So here we're starting with this little education icon, and as we were talking earlier, when you go through the framework, you can find these little cross-section descriptions at the end of each sector, and they'll have those little icons. So if you're, if you're in the education system, if you work with schools or are in a school or a preschool setting, and that's of most interest to you, even if you don't necessarily work in those other sectors, you can skim those other sectors at the end of each chapter and look for your little icon to find, oh, hey, there I am. So as an example, let's say you're teaching children where the food comes from and how it's grown and how it might affect their health. And your focus really in that setting might, I'm just making this up here, might just be food literacy, right? But it's within that education sector because it's learning, skills, content, maybe some youth development related within the school or preschool setting, right? So this may happen in the garden, and then those activities, go ahead and hit the arrow, are going to actually potentially affect some of the choices that children make about what food they eat. Like what food are they comfortable eating? How do they prepare their own food? And this actually has an impact potentially on food consumption and chronic disease, things like type 2 diabetes, potentially preventing these kinds of things if they're choosing these healthier options like fresh foods that they grew themselves, right? So that's a public health piece. And then at the same time, you can hit the arrow again. These lessons may include teaching children some really basic skills, and basic doesn't mean not challenging for some of us. I have a hard time with my compost pile, but I'm just pointing out that that children might learn some skills related to preventing waste, things that actually can help at a smaller scale in terms of their environmental quality. That may also inspire in them kind of a stewardship or a wanting to take care of some sort of a natural landscape or a garden or something like that. So this is what we mean when we're talking about cross-sector connections. Like we're trying to find out and articulate, well, what's happening over here and how might it contribute to what's happening over there. So we did a little bit of that for you and encourage you to think more about that as well. And then go ahead to the next slide, and I just wanted to point out, I briefly highlighted it earlier, but you should flip to that back, those back appendices, and take a look at the various resources. We've hyperlinked them in the PDF document so that you should be able to just go when you're looking at this on a computer and kind of scroll through and find some different things. I don't think I need to say a lot about that other than, there will be the website. You can upload your own tools as you go, and I'm going to pass it back to Anupama to wrap it up, and we can start taking some of your questions soon. Go ahead, Anupama.
Thanks, Tia. So to wrap up, here are a couple of key takeaways for you from this webinar today. First of all, I think that evaluation for transformation is the first ever attempt to develop a framework like this for farm to school or farm to preschool that is cross-sectoral and cross-user. So what that means is that with this framework, the hope is that in the next 5 to 10 years, it'll be a reality that across the country, farm to school and farm to preschool sites are using similar language, common language for describing efforts and activities and evaluating programs. That sites will be using common outcomes, indicators, and measures, and that sites will be, as a result, be able to compare notes on implementation and evaluation strategies. Just imagine the wealth of national data that we'll have cross-site that can be compared and contrasted, and that really will give us a sense of the progress we've been making with farm to school and farm to preschool in the country. If folks are using common tools, we'll also be able to compare and contrast effectively. And in 5 to 10 years, hopefully the framework's policy recommendations will also be driving the passage of many more policies at the local, state, and federal level. So in a nutshell, this framework, we hope, will help with promoting and implementing the farm to school model more consistently with a common vision, evaluating it more consistently across the country, irrespective of regional and state differences, so that we can all work together towards a common national vision for farm to school and farm to preschool. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Chelsea to take our questions, and we'd be happy to take questions.
Sure, thanks, Anupama. And thank you to all of the presenters today. That was really wonderful and informative and a really great view of an exciting new resource. So I'm just a reminder, if you have a question today, just type it into the webinar control panel, and I will get to as many of them as we have time for. If you have a question that isn't answered today, please send it to the email address on your screen, and we will make sure that someone responds to you. So our first question is, if national partners such as USDA will begin to use this evaluation framework for their RFAs, et cetera.
Could you repeat the question, Chelsea?
Yeah, sure. This person is wondering, and I think I'll broaden this question a little bit. This person is wondering if we have any existing partnerships with other organizations and partners, for example, USDA, who have already agreed to use this framework in their work. For example, the example it's given here is if USDA will be adopting aspects of this framework for their RFAs.
Yeah, I can jump in and answer. To start off with, I will say that folks from the USDA Farm to School team, members from the USDA Farm to School team, were involved intricately with the development of this framework and have been, providing inputs here as well. So our hope is that funders such as USDA Farm to School, as well as private foundations and other funders too will start to look at the indicators, the outcomes indicators and measures that are listed especially under program level, to really get a realistic picture of what is possible for programs, for the program level, for the site level folks to be measuring and reporting on. And so our vision is that, yes, USDA as well as other funders use parts of this framework and incorporate them within their that are for and the outcomes that are sort of anticipated or expected. So our hope is that we will be at that point where some funders will be using this. I think that there is a specific example that I might call on Tia to elaborate if she knows more. There's a specific Oregon where I believe there is a grant program in Oregon that is looking at the information in the framework to articulate the types of things that the grantees will be asked to report on. We've also shared the framework with other national organizations such as Food Corps, School Food Focus, and other national organizations that provide funding and or support programs at the site level, and sort of come to a common understanding. Of course, there's differences in how each organization enters this, and so I think that's just the reality of it. But our hope is that will happen, and I'm hopeful that we will get to that point.
That's great, Anupama. Thank you. There's a couple general questions that I think I can answer, actually. Just a FYI for everyone, if you are still looking for that link, I've just posted the link to the resource in the chat area. This is probably in the bottom of your webinar control panel if you have not accessed that yet. And just wanted to let you all know that this webinar today is being recorded, and our plan is to get that posted on our website and have the video archived there in case you missed part of it or would like to review this webinar later. Also wanted to let you know that aside from downloading this resource, you can also order a print copy of it. We have an order form on our website. We can't currently take orders directly on the website. You need to mail in a form with a check, but we're working on a way to take the payments directly from our website, and we hope to have that up in the near future. So check back with us if that's the method that you need to purchase it. I'm going to real quickly, we have a number of other questions coming in, but I also have a question for all of our attendees today before we carry on with our Q&A session. Just another poll, and would love to have your feedback. This is really helpful to us. So thanks for quickly weighing in here and letting us know how useful this webinar has been for your work today. Just give everyone another moment or two to respond. Again, if you're listening in, we've just put a poll up on the screen. And thanks to everyone who has voted. Okay, we'll go back to the regular Q&A now. I really, really do appreciate that. So our next question is, someone is saying they love the framework and they're wondering how people will use the framework when they're developing tools, and if there will be any consistent way that people will coordinate their development of tools on the local level through this framework, if you have any vision for that.
This is Anupama. I can jump in, and Gail and Tia, feel free to join and add as well. I think the intent of the framework is to provide example tools that are available, as well as validated tools that are available. So we have a listing of evaluation tools that are included as part of the appendix section. I mean, I think the hope is that folks will be able to look at common ways of measuring, agree on common ways for measuring specific indicators and outcomes, and look at the tools that are already available there. So they're not, starting from scratch, but really building on things that have already happened in the field, and hopefully connecting with people that were involved in developing that tool that is provided as a sample or an example. So I think there's certainly opportunities for folks to connect with other people that have done work in this area in the past, and whose samples are available. And we hope that will be facilitated as part of this framework, where people will start to look at some common measures, and as a result develop common tools. And as Tia mentioned, this is a work in progress. So if there are times that folks have developed additional tools using this framework or that are relevant to the framework, please go ahead and send them to the National Farm to School Network so that we can add them to the website, as well as include, in an updated version of this document, or also and provided on our website. Tia or Gail, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, this is Tia. Really quickly, I just wanted to say that, during the process of developing this framework, we talked to a lot of different organizations that work at the state or national level, and people have asked, they're really excited and they want to see the framework. They have a tool that they've already developed for one use, and they'd love to create a new version for farm to school specifically, for example, or they'd like to, basically the framework becomes kind of a platform for networking and also collaborating on developing things that align with the framework. And as Anupama mentioned, we had a number of individuals on our steering committee reviewing the framework, earlier drafts of it, who are working in those different organizations. And as far as I know from them, that they've aimed to try to make sure that even if they're not using exact framework language, that whatever they are putting out there is in alignment, so that there's not conflicting messages that farm to school folks are getting.
Thanks, Tia and Anupama.
So please share your tools.
Right. I think that was Gail. Was that you saying, please share your tools? Absolutely.
Yes. Yes.
And I'll just mention that if you have a resource or a tool that you think should be added to the National Farm to School Network's resource database, please send it to the address that's on your screen there right now. Here's a fairly straightforward question about how the framework is organized. Is there a ranking or difference between measures? For example, is measure 1.1 more of a key measure than 1.10?
Tia, do you want to take that?
No, we didn't. We didn't do any type of ranking of importance. Often, if there is any form of how one thing relates to the other is it might be that maybe 1.1 is kind of an entry point, and then there are a couple, that entry point then expands into kind of other little areas around that little entrance, but it's not, there's no number 1 is more important than number 5. And one thing to keep in mind is that you'll read when we were developing criteria for selecting different outcomes and measures across these 3 levels, there were some, certain things that are appropriate at the program site level, meaning we were aiming to try to find measures that were easy to collect, didn't take a whole lot of resources. There's so many things that people want to know that are really important that, people want that information. So then that's why there became this split between what's happening at the site level and what's happening at the research level. Although we understand there may be a lot of evaluators who may effectively do things that can be published in the research realm. And we didn't mean to say one group doesn't do the other work. We just meant that one really builds on the other.
Our next question is if there's any plan to collect, organize, and interpret and share the data and information that farm-to-school programs around the country are going to be gathering about their programs using this framework.
Not that I know of. That's a great question.
It came up a lot in our development process, and there isn't a simple way to do it yet. So I think that's still a conversation that's evolving.
And here's another question about sort of along the same lines of expanding scope. Is there any discussion about how this framework could be adapted for other food systems work? For example, farm to college or farm to hospital?
I think it could certainly be adapted. As I said, early on in the discussion, the group that was developing the framework decided that we wanted to focus it on specifically around farm to school and farm to preschool, since it's, it seemed like the 4 sectors that we were looking at, especially education, since there are educational outcomes that are connected with, children's academic achievement, et cetera, that would not be relevant for a broader farm to institution, site level. But I think there are certainly things within the framework as you look at the community economic development specifically, and also environmental quality and public health, and in some in education that could be easily picked up and used for other sites, be it colleges or hospitals or or other farm to cafeteria, farm to institution sites. I'd love to see if Gail has any thoughts on that, since she works in the farm to institution field specifically around around larger food systems work.
Yes, I think you just hit it on the head. You can easily use some of these outcomes and indicators for looking at other kinds of institutions. The way you collect the data would be a little bit different, but this is a framework after all, so these are the kinds of data and measures that you would want to be looking for. And we've certainly done this at a college level and encouraged institutions to do this on their own as well. And I think that we could also do, we've done this a little bit with hospitals. So definitely these kinds of measures and outcomes would apply to other institutions.
Thanks, Gail. And just a reminder, a couple people are saying they came in late. We've posted the link to the toolkit on in the chat area in the webinar control panel, but that's certainly not the only place to find it. You can go to our website, farmtoschool.org. We've just put a new link right on our home screen slideshow. It's easy to get to. You can also go to our resources page. I think we have time for about one more question, but just in the, speaking of the webinar, also wanted to let you know that we would love your continued feedback, and we would love to know how you find the resource and how useful it is. So we've included a poll on our resource download page and we hope everyone will give us feedback as they download this and begin to use it. So please come back and let us know how it works for you. And again, that's all located on farmtoschool.org. Our next question is kind of a comment and a question. This person is saying that they sometimes wonder if the overemphasis in the education sector as the primary change strategy, when challenges faced by people living in poverty seem to drive so many problems, when we often articulate across all the sectors. So when we look at the process of change, such as our example that we've given on this webinar of education impacting public health and environmental quality, are there any attempts to shift the narrative more towards addressing economic development and poverty issues first, and then allowing community-based solutions to grow from that increased agency in all sectors? And I think Tia said that she'll take a stab at this one.
Yeah, I think that what this question is driving at to me is kind of the flipping on the head. So while, you know, farm to school may have a structure of maybe a variety of different types of activities and elements and the supporting seed elements, really what may end up being needed in one community or another is really community-driven efforts where kind of people are finding out what they really need are jobs, right? And then maybe they're not necessarily thinking about gardening in schools quite yet. One of the things that we did in this, and this is a little bit that something Gail brought up earlier, is that when you look through the indicators, and I realize there are several of them, more than several, you're going to notice that there are some elements of other types of strategies that are embedded in there that get at this type of a question that this person's asking. So for example, how much are different individuals engaged in decision making about farm to school efforts at multiple levels? Are there student members, community members, farmers? We also suggested different types of measurements based on feedback from some reviewers that Gail brought up earlier, and we thank them very much for that input. We encouraged people to not just look at, for example, community economic development generally across different areas of the food system, but also who's benefiting. So can we split out the demographics from that, you know, really rough summarized data to find out, are people of color, are women, are people of different types of abilities benefiting, in what way, how much, etc. And I think that as we nudge these different types of indicators to take place, it kind of creates the automatic, hey, there are other ways to do this, and let's find out what works in your community, right?
Thanks, Tia. I think we're going to wind this down, and I'll give our presenters a last chance for any comments or thoughts, but I just wanted to remind everyone one more time to visit farmtoschool.org. If you have other questions that weren't answered in this webinar, please feel free to email them. And I just also wanted to let you all know that we have some other resources to help you understand and interpret the main resource on our website. So on the same page where you can download Evaluation for Transformation, you can get 4 sectoral briefs for each of the 4 sectors that the framework covers, as well as a user guide. And there's also a template PowerPoint presentation. So if you want to share this information with others, you can customize that PowerPoint and use it. So just wanted to call your attention to those other fact sheets and user guides that you can use to better understand this. Also want to call your attention to our upcoming webinars. As I mentioned at the beginning, we have an ongoing series, and our next webinar will be on September 9th, and it will cover farm to school and child nutrition reauthorization. So again, you can register for that at farmtoschool.org on our resources page. And now I'll bring it back to the presenters and just ask if there's any closing thoughts or comments, and if not, we'll sign off.
Thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you everybody for attending. We hope to you'll find this framework document to be useful, and we are certainly looking for your feedback and suggestions to keep this moving along to help the movement. Thank you so much for attending.
And thank all of you for the great
Thanks,
presentation,
everybody.
and thank everyone for attending as well. Thank you.